All right, today we're sitting down with Dave DeKam from Falmouth, Michigan, and we're sitting at his kitchen table today, and we're hoping to talk to him a little bit about transitioning to organic. But first, Dave, do you want to just do a quick introduction of yourself and who you are, where we're at, how long you've been organic, how long you've been farming, how many cows you're milking, all that kind of stuff?
Okay, all right. We're a fourth generation farm here. We milk about 275, 80, 90 cows, Holsteins mostly, some crossbreeds, but 95% Holsteins. Basically, we've had probably 60 years of AI breeding into these cows. I'm basically sitting at the table where I grew up at. Farm pretty much my whole life. Spent 1 year off the farm at a John Deere dealer, mostly changing rear tractor tires. Always had an interest in farming. I started out early. I guess at a young age or out of school and early in my farming career was went to a lot of meetings, sucked a lot of information up. Just was like a sponge, and it didn't take me long to figure out it was either going to have to be really good at what we did or not bother because of the way the pricing structure and everything was changing. Because when I was young, we used to have a support, and I remember my mom saying when I was in high school, we got a milk raise at about 2 or 3 years times over the course of 2 years. And I remember her telling me, it's like, well, this is really too much. She said, it tried to put money in the coffers, and we're going to end up, hurting ourselves because everybody's going to want to farm. And that was back in the early 80s when everybody was going farming and the government was pushing. And so at any rate, that always set in my brain about you can get a little too much of a good thing. But obviously after that, they kind of changed the whole structure around, and it was, I went to all of these extension meetings and everything, and well, you've got to grow 8% a year to be able to keep up because the pay price is the same. So you need it through volume. Well, because I got into the breeding thing and the cow families a lot, I thought we could kind of cheat the system by just selling extra dairy cattle. So I've kind of done that most of my life, is sold excess dairy cows, good cows. Found a couple longer term buyers that our cattle really worked good at. We used to have semen in the tank that looked a lot like a registered herd, and I had some friends that were in the registered business and stuff. So our breeding went back. I used a lot of different bulls, a lot of bulls. I had like 30, 40 bulls in a tank for a 120 cow herd. That's what we had in our old parlor conventionally. And I knew right where that cow number ought to be for managing that barn. If you got over about 122 cows, we were quite overcrowded. We were down to 76 or 8 free stalls at the end, and up to 115 cows plus or minus. But at 120 cows, you just start adding cows, and the milk tank wouldn't change. And when you pulled cows back, the cow's milk per cow would go up, and so I knew where that number was over time, and I was, really involved with the cows back then. My dad's herdsman, and I lived and ate and breathed farming, and knew of them cattle in the barn probably better than I knew most of my extended family. And but then when we the parlor was getting wore out, and I had to make a decision on what to do, taking a plunge and building this new facility that we built down. It's been 12 or 13 years ago. So what I looked at diligently at the time was trying to go robotic milkers, because I really didn't want to milk more cows. I didn't want a bunch more employees, but they just didn't have the regulations all set yet, and I didn't know how long it would take the government to get that figured out. So we ended up taking the plunge and going into a lot of debt to build a double 10 parallel parlor. And because of our geography right here. We've got a waterway kind of goes right past several of the buildings. In fact, it goes between our corn crib and the shed. And so we're up against a fence line over here. So when we built the new facility, it was like building a whole new farm, because now we needed we needed a manure pit, we needed a freestall barn, we needed a parlor. And in the midst of building, I decided I needed a bedding barn up there, because I could see somebody didn't have straw for a pen on Saturday night. They're not going to come down here to go get a bale or something. They won't do it. So, so really it took on quite a pile of debt to build a whole new farm up there. And, smart people kind of do that in succession over a few years. And at the time I thought, well, it was before, the big boom of 06, 07, and 08, when crop prices went so high and the economy really heated up. So I thought, well, I can pay a little interest. Interest was cheap. I got the materials fairly reasonable before they all got inflation popped in. But now over the course of time, when I look at how much interest I paid on that whole diving off, I always said I was able to wander in the pool waiting around, and when we went up there to build a new facility, it was grab the snorkel, head on in, and that's kind of, it's been that way ever since, really. I mean, once you start taking that on, and then we started expanding acres, and so, yeah, instead of getting by with one dump truck with a dump box, and using my brother's now, we're farming separately, and now I need bigger trucks, and now I start looking at land 5, 6, 7, 8 miles from home, so now I need 3 or 4 trucks, and everything just multiplies. And so but I kind of drifted off the subject of when I was young, and I was really pushing the cows and using all the tools coming around, and we did a little bit of we did quite a fair amount of, we never used any BST ever. I was kind of quite opposed to that. But we did, use Lutal Ace and so on. I tried a little time breeding, but I was never in favor of all them shots. And the good Lord made these cows to do what they ought to do, and most of these things are crutches to try to, do lack of husbandry and doing things. So we've always, for the most part, bred cows on heat observations, and when you're living with the cattle all the time, that you can do that, and you get a little bigger, and we kind of, when we went from the 120 to 250, we kind of, you're right on that bubble of keeping track of things. And at that time, when we started building the barn, and actually shortly before, I had hired on herdsmen so I could spend the time I needed to. My father was getting up in age and not able to do as many things, and so I've always been a bit of an experimenter. I like to play with the dirt and play with crops and play with things. I no-tilled back in the mid-'80s when they were starting to get that up here, and I learned a bunch of things about no-till. I guess part of the reason I went organic, when I don't have a lot of neighbors that are going that way, is I think I got a little Dr. Pibb or Mr. Dr. Pepper in my blood or whatever. I got to be a little different anyways, but I'm not afraid to fail. And I don't really, it doesn't bother me so bad if they're talking about me at the local coffee shop. At least maybe they're not talking about my neighbor then, I guess. But I don't mind being a little bit out of the fold. So I've always tried things that seemed like they made sense to me, and with all the meetings and info I've gotten, I just thought some things just didn't make sense. They didn't feel right, and I've always kind of, even when I was young pushing cows, and I got a little trophy for our DHIA most gain in a year, and bought a mixer and put that in right out of high school, and we increased a lot of milk production. I had the high cow in the county, but I just, all these DAs we were doing all the time, and it just didn't seem to flow right. It's like, yeah, we could get milk out of these cows. We've been breeding them forever. I'd sit at that red book hours and hours and hours trying to do matings to these cows and trying to cheat the system. They say you can only fix one thing at a time on a cow, maybe two. Well, with 40 bulls in the tank and looking at all the traits in the red book, I'm trying to fix 3 or 4 things at once. And, I'm always trying to cheat. If they tell me I can't do it, then you kind of up the ante a little bit. So I'm that type of personality. So I'm not getting into transition very much at this point, but that's the backdrop of kind of what cloth I've made out of a little bit. And we got 90-some pounds of cow, conventionally. We actually went to 2.5 times a day milking for a while. It was very interesting to me. Most neighbors and information I had would say that we would get about a 10% boost on 3 times a day milking, 8-9 pounds. And when I went to and to get 2.5 times a day, it takes a 2-week schedule. You're milking, what is it, 10-hour shift, 10 hours. Or 9.5, I don't remember what it is, but to make that work, well, we got 4.5 pounds out of it. It was really striking to me that we went halfway to 3 times a day, and we got 4.5 pounds of cow instead of 9. And but I always felt bad when we got over 90 pounds because the poor cows would come in and they're leaking milk all over the place. The alley would be cream colored, and the poor suckers would come in with huge bags, and we had some really good cows that could really milk, But and then when we made the transition into the new barn, we got 94 or 5 pounds of cow because they were uncrowded. We had all kinds of room up there, comfy, bigger stalls and just way better conditions. And the local nutritionist out of the co-ops was really pushing. I mean, it took me a little while to figure this out, but it's like, holy cow, man, we're pushing grain at these girls. I mean, I was really happy to say we got 95 pounds of cow, but at what cost, And they never have hit that cent. Well, I say that. We went to 3 times a day for a while, and for whatever reason in that new barn, I never made it work. We only ever got 3-4 pounds of cow out of it. It takes 6 pounds to make it break even. I keep looking at DHA and stuff. I like numbers. I'm not that... everybody likes to see their name in there, but we've got some namers that, do a lot of work to get to the top of that list, and I'm not that worried about that. But and I did find out when you go to 3 times a day on DHA, what happens with the numbers. You're only taking 1 or 2 milkings out of the 3, and we would be 6-7 pounds a day off on the DHA. So then I started, that's how these guys are getting 105-6 pounds of cow a day. Some of it's real, some of it ain't. So you learn stuff as you go. You just learn. But we tried it for 10 months, and when we quit 3 times a day, we only lost about 2 to 3 pounds of cow.
Oh,
and
really?
Nobody could figure out why. Nobody could figure out why. We had good feed, we got good cows, we got good facilities. We tweak here, try this, keep out, hold the pin a little bit more, and we never really made it pay. And everybody else is going to 3 times a day because apparently it pays. There's a lot of smart dairymen around here, and progressive guys. But so I don't know why. Nobody could tell me why. It's kind of like our grazing fiasco. I never really got a good answer what happened there. But any rate, I'm eating into the interview down here with background. So
well, what kind of strikes me is that we always talk about, these days how striking the difference is between conventional and organic. It's either conventional, very large, and I mean, you're in an area around here that has some very big dairies, and then organic tend to be smaller, grazing, don't push cows so hard. And what kind of struck me there is that you've lived in both worlds.
Right.
So let's get to what put you at the point to get away from the 95 pounds per cow and start looking at grazing and organic as a way to move the farm forward.
Right. I think actually the grazing bug, we've always grazed our heifers on pasture. We had a pasture 1.5 miles from home, and always put our young stock on heifers. We never really had very good heifer facilities here. We had 20 cattle across the fields here in an old barn where my dad was born, and we had bred heifers out on this pasture that we'd cart feed to, and always replacing the dirt, and it'd be in mud in November, and just not very nice conditions. But we always grazed, and we tried I actually worked with my brother back when we did some intensive grazing back then, probably in the early 90s. Went to some classes, and then he actually set up a intensive grazing, rotational grazing situation at his dairy with about 110 or 20 cows. So I had some experience with that. Always kind of obviously liked it when the cattle were out, and but I also, trial and error. There's some things work and some things don't. So when I built the new facility, for the first time ever, I had a good, nice heifer barn, because that's what the old cow barn was designed or able to be turned into. And so for the first time, I didn't have cattle on pasture, because we left them here in the barn, and then we got a nice big manure pit there, and the pasture where we was using before was maybe 20, 30 acres, and posts were, I put the cedar post in when I was a kid, and they were all falling down, and the fence was in disrepair, and half of it's around a swamp, or it has swamp in it, so there was lots of incentive not to graze there anymore. And then we had this Taj Mahal of a heifer barn, and cattle were doing well, and we could finally take care of them a little better, and so I lost that grazing connection just before we went to transition. And to go back to your point, Brian, of what kind of stirred this was, for a long time, I've kind of wanted to be more self-sufficient on the farm and not be taking half my milk check and giving to the co-ops. All these inputs and all this extra stuff. Plus, I really felt that at some point I might have to try to make a living off of cows with really cheap milk. So I wanted to be able to graze them if I had to, because that looked like a way to survive if need be. So that was always in the back of my head. And then I started dabbling 15, 20 years ago with a little bit of organic trial and error in the fields. Did a cornfield the first year. I did it on a patch of sandier soil here close to home that had gotten kind of froze out in the spring. We had a lot of really cold weather. The hay was poor. It was kind of a thin stand, so I dissed it, and it was really dry. And it was just enough. I dissed it a few times in a sandy soil, so it chewed up good. And there must have been enough moisture in the sand to germinate the corn, and it was very loose, and I didn't have much weed pressure. I cultivated it once, maybe twice, and thought, wow, this ain't so tough. I could do this. Because I grew up on a cultivator, putt with the old 530 with a 2-row cultivator. So I cultivated lots of corn when I was young, and it didn't bother me near as bad as it did my brother. He didn't like it at all, but I could do it. And I like I said, I kind of always liked how the corn looked when it got done, and aerating the soil. When you're playing with the soil, you see things, And going back to the conventional, I used to spray Valpar because I wanted the top production. So I used BMR silage long before it was available, or I shouldn't say available, long before it was hitting mainstream. And I got a 3-pound a cow production jump out of our BMR. Well, the old BMR was really touchy in the field when it was ripe. You didn't have a lot of time before it started falling down. Mm-hmm. But you got milk out of it. Well, then when I noticed 6-8 years later, they're getting these new varieties that are better with agronomy. They stand in the field better, and it was really good corn, but I didn't get the milk production. So, you see things like that as you go. But so I dabbled in this corn, and I thought, well, I can do this organic thing. And then the next year I tried another 5 years, and it was a complete flop. Similar soils right close by to the other one, tore up hayfield. It was one of these summers where we had these little spits of rain all the time. And I'm a perfectionist by trade, so I want a day or two stretch where we got good sun and wind to kill the weeds. So I kept dragging my feet on cultivating it, and it was just damp. Just every other day we'd get a little drizzle or 1/10 of an inch or whatever. Meanwhile, the weeds took over, and at the end of the summer, I had a whole bunch of pencil-sized stalks that were 5 foot tall with ears about as big as mine are, and it was just a complete, and that's what I learned up front. It's like, if I'm going to do this organic thing, I better be at it 110% or I'm going to lose my shorts. And then that's when we made the decision to build this barn. So between my experience there, knowing I had to put a lot of effort into getting the agronomy and the organic thing off the ground. And then I spoke to a certifying agency in the meantime when I was playing around with these crops, and what they was telling me for record keeping and everything, and as far behind as I was trying to get the work done and everything else, and I just, no, I can't do it now. If I'm going to build this building, I don't have time to do, I can't do both. So the organic thing got shelved for a few years while I jumped into the pool of debt and built some nice facilities. I always said, Greenstone, build me a nice barn up there. I hope they let me keep it for a while. So, at any rate.
So one of the things that we definitely wanted to talk about too, besides cropping, and we can get back into cropping here shortly, but is transitioning cows from, you were talking about going from the old barn up to the new place, and you went from 120 to 250 cows approximately in that time period, and all of a sudden you had great facilities, so cows were now confined, didn't have grazing anymore. But then going back, looking at organic as an option, obviously grazing is a requirement. So can you talk a little bit about what that was like, putting cows, and now milk cows, back out to pasture, and what the learning experience was there?
Right. It was a pretty steep curve. Our milking herd had been on kind of a /dirt 5-acre pasture. It was half grass, half dirt, but for all practical purposes, it was a dirt lot. And then, of course, the Heifers had been on pasture. Well, when we made the transition up to the new barn, and everything was confined, and we quit pasturing completely, by the time we started transitioning the herd to organic, pretty much everything was a rookie. I mean, we probably had a few old cows that were used to pasture, and our transition year got pushed back one year because I didn't have my pasture. I didn't feel my pastures at home here. We've only got about 115 acres that we graze. It's all irrigated, and 90% of it's irrigated. But you go into that with quite an unknown. How many cows can we sustain here and make the requirements? So I actually sold off 70 head of dairy cows before we even started grazing that spring, because I just had in my head that this was going to maybe support 220, 30, 40 cows. Yeah, I sold off a lot of cattle, which was okay. So that gave me a little bit of extra cash going into transition, or at least paid down some bills, because at the time I was also really running up my co-op bill with $7 corn back in 08. Mm-hmm. And I'll get into that a little bit later too, about what not to do on transition. But the grazing part, when the cows went out, and I really knew that it would have been wise to get these calves out and get the young stock with their feet wet and grazing. But I just was so busy and taking on more that I just never got to it. And then even by putting the cow grazing back an extra year, because we had I seeded a fair amount of the ground at home. It had always been in rotation. And then I worked up the old alfalfa fields and stuff and put them in corn one year before. Then I was going to pretty much seed the bulk of the farm that wasn't left in grass hay. And we had a big wind after we seeded. Kind of just pasture really wasn't thick enough. I figured putting them cows out on that blow sand the next year was just going to destroy it. So we pushed the cows back, the grazing, the start a whole year. We also, in the meantime, hoarded everything that was organic grain or transition grain, so we wouldn't have to buy a lot of organic grains going through transition. And when we started grazing that spring, we started cows on the first of the year, and of course we had been on a high forage diet before in the past, didn't have a lot of goodies in, probably 2-3 years before we went organic. Again, I don't mind playing around with stuff, and we're always tweaking our ration, but we had went to a high forage diet at one point, had really good forages, and we went from approximately 90 pounds a cow, high 80s, down to mid to high 70s. We gave up 14 pounds of milk and I figured that we were breaking even on the cost because our components went from a 3.65 to a 4.1, and our protein jumped from 3 teens, maybe 3.2, up to a 3.35. So with the component pricing difference, spending less on trucking for the extra gallons of milk, the actual numbers worked out as a wash, and then I figured the added benefit was less stress on the cows and less medical problems, and just easier on the cows. So I thought this is a money maker, and we're just making better milk. So I wasn't, again, scared to go with a high forage diet, but in my mind, out of that whole experience, I thought these Holsteins would milk high 60s, 70 pounds on half a dozen pounds of grain. I found out I was wrong. when we started grazing that first summer, again, I had ran up a large debt at the local co-ops, higher than what I wish they would have let me. And by buying all this corn and grain and really pushing the cows, and I had shelled corn that I'd bought the previous year. I was trying to use up all of my stuff that wasn't organic, and when we got especially when grazing hit, we was probably in the mid 60s in production. Mid to high 60s, and then usually spring flush, everybody thinks you put cows out on grass, they got this good lush grass, you get a milk bump. We kind of didn't get any bump, but we was holding our own on the front end, but the cows were under some stress because they weren't used to grazing at all. They were used to being pigs at a trough. They're used to fighting for their feed because we've been overcrowded. We got 200 foot of space on each side of the barn for 100 cows, but we're putting 125, 30 cows, 40 cows. We was milking over 300 cows up there before we sold them 70. So the cows are used to taking turns to eat, fighting at the bunk, fighting, keeping their eyes open for a place to lay down. But we could manage to that to a certain degree, and a while back I said I knew exactly where them cow numbers needed to be in that old facility. I knew right where the sweet spot was. I've never found that up there because I think I shot right past it. We was kind of low for a while, didn't make it to 2.25. We kind of held cows back like everybody does, and then you're a little thin when you get up there. And I didn't buy any cows. I never bought cows before in my life, and so I never really found that sweet spot. And I think we kind of leapfrog over wherever that was. And but I thought, 240, 250, I got 220 stalls total. That ought to be in a nice spot, and 218 stalls with a fresh pen. But when we let the cows out to pasture, they, and of course I was used to see it. That was always the funnest part about first day letting cows out, a lot of heel kicking, and then you hear a few grunts because they're meeting the new electric fence, which is actually I think a farmer's best moment of the year. It's always been mine. Listen to a couple of cows go. So at any rate, that may be why they pay it back with a few kicks later on. I don't know, but our cows run around, ate some hay. We got this beautiful lush pasture out. It was probably a little past prime. We had a wet spring that year. I won't say past prime. It was prime, but I mean, it's 8-10 inches tall. I put 31 different things in my pasture mix, and by that I mean, I had 3-4 varieties of alfalfa. I had 3 red clovers, 2 white clovers, every kind of grass in the Byron Seeds book you could come up with. I figured I've got some heavier clay, loam soils up here. I got quite a bit of sand. I've got some lower ground towards the creek flats. It's sandy soil but can have wet feet. And I got blow sand knobs that barely grow a weed if it don't have water. So I threw a little bit of everything in there with a salad, thinking that something's going to grow someplace. Mm-hmm. And as it turned out, the tall fescue did really well on our sand. And of course, when you read in the book, this is the most palatable tall fescue, and cows really like it. Well, maybe beef cows really like it, but our dairy cows didn't like it at all. And so we really struggled with intake early on, and the cows were absolutely spoiled and accustomed to the grazing. They were standing at the gate after an hour out there, 45 minutes bellowing, and it took them almost a month out on pasture before they laid down. They wouldn't lay down out there.
Really?
They I mean, beautiful weather. They got all this nice feed, and they're standing at the gate, bawling their heads off, all grouped up. And it's like, you might get a couple lay down, but out of 120 cows in a group, you could count on your hands how many was laying down because they're so used to this beautiful beach sand. Mm-hmm. The ground's too hard. This is too hard. And I got to pull to get the hay now. I got to work at it. I can't just wolf it in at the bunk. So it was hard. It took them cows. And of course, I wasn't a rookie grazer, but it'd been a while, and lots of my employees were rookies, so we had rookie cows and we had nothing but rookie things going on all summer down there, and it took a while to get the cows to.
So how long did it take for the cows to all of a sudden realize that, oh, this is actually really good feed?
It took all summer.
Did it take all summer?
Well, not all summer for them to realize it was good feed because cows eat grass pretty quickly, but as we made several errors on our end for how we got them out. We didn't get them out early enough on lush enough grass. It took us that whole first summer to figure out that the tall fescue is tough grass for dairy cows, and especially once it gets past 10, 12 inches. And we had a phenomenal year with that extra rain that spring, so good growth. I got super lush and heavy cuts out there. We took about half of our first cut hay, chopped it because it was going to get away from us. And so you learn all these things about, succession of paddocks, and, we cut most all of that extra hay to once instead of, the next year we cut it in a couple stages to kind of drag that out so you don't have this, half of your paddocks that are kind of, coming along as they're grazed off it over time, and all of a sudden, boom, the other half of your stuff's all the same day again. So we had to stretch out our harvesting. We learned that the first year. And the cows, they got used to it after a while, but, things like they would eat under the fence. They'd all line up and eat under the fence. They'd have 2-acre paddock, plenty of room to get, spread around, but that's what they're used to. They're trained to like pigs at a trough.
Fence line feeder.
Yeah, exactly. They're always coming up the manger. That's where the food's at. So I got to stand next to somebody else to eat. And even though they would graze every time wherever the fence was, that was grazed on the ground. So we noticed this stuff, and it took. It took a while for them cows to learn, and you got older cows that have been in confinement their whole life and been standing in manure forever. Like I said, by the time we went out the door, there was very few of them old cows had memory of pasture as heifers. We had been out of it that long, 5, 6 years, 7 years. And
so now when you're bringing heifers in now that are grazed, that's a whole new ball game.
Absolutely, because I would say because our heifers are all on pasture, pretty much full pasture all summer, they go to work. I mean, they know right away what they got to do, and they can't wait to get out the door. And as as every year clicks by, more and more of the herd is in that mode. Plus the cows that have been out there 3-4 years, they know what's going on too. So it's the older ones are learning, and the new ones, that's all they know. If if their feet ain't on cement, they're looking for something to eat, and they all go to work. Because that's what, that's just how they're trained. It's like everything else. Train a child and how he will go. Yeah. And that's
one of the things that, I was here a couple of times when you were first putting cows out on pasture, and you said it was all rookies, the cows and the employees, and, you weren't a rookie, but you were getting back to it. I don't think even the most experienced grazer that would have known exactly how to set this place up would have been able to not run into problems, just because those cows just had no idea what they were doing.
Right.
And it's like Mike was saying, and once you had heifers out on pasture and bring them into the milking herd, they know what to do now. It's just a learned thing over time. So I just found that really interesting. So now that I've been coming here for a while, it probably took a good 1.5 to 2 years to really actually get cows prepared and they're ready to graze.
Right. Right.
Did your production come back up to your 70s now?
Well, the pendulum has swung all over. So the very first year, that was the other thing that we had going on besides the cows not eating grass. We're feeding them too mature of grazing, of pasture. We was feeding only what we had, so they was only getting a pound or two of protein and 4 or 5 pounds of corn. And they went from the 60s to mid 60s by the end of the summer when we hit August. And while we had that slump that first year, we had another interesting thing, outlier that kind of happened in the middle of that summer. The cows actually by the end of June they were grazing good. You know, we're getting 40% plus, and you know, because we're at two we got our foot in two camps here. You know, we're TMR all winter, and we got high producing cows bred to milk, and the grazing is really, really good for the cows, but it's a requirement for the organic thing, and that's what, you know, you got to make it or you're not going to make it. So you really got to work on that when these cows are kind of bred and trained for what they're doing. And we've been able to kind of make that transition. Cows have gotten used to it. I think some of the ones that we had 2,000 pound cows, you know, that were they want to milk 150, 60 pounds a day. And some of them have weeded themselves out. We've had cows that I thought would improve with the extra exercise, and I think it's as I'm getting older, I'm finding that out. You think extra walking and everything when you got a bum knee is going to start helping you? No, when you got bad parts, extra walking makes it hurt worse, and I think that's what we found out with some of these lamer cows that had a little hitch in their get along when they got to start going out the far end of the farm for pasture, and they kind of weeded themselves out. They just couldn't take they've been on cement too long and just had too many things going back. But going back to the grazing thing, we had I guess I better circle back and talk about your production. Come about the 1st of July, we was getting it. Cows are getting it. They was going out there working. They weren't bellering no more. They weren't standing by the gate. They were going out and eating, and they was, you know, after a month, 5-6 weeks, they were really getting in the groove. Everything was clicking, and all of a sudden, just like somebody hit a switch, they wouldn't eat grass. They wouldn't eat out there. They would walk from one end of the paddock to the other. They'd take a bite or two, and they was bawling the whole time, all the way back. In 20 minutes, half an hour after they were out there, they all up by the gate bawling. And they're walking over this lush mix of grass and pasture, and there's good, you know, even if they didn't like tall fescue, that's only a quarter or a third of it. There's all this other stuff. I had plantain, I had chicory, you know, you name it, I had it out there, and we were really beating our heads on the wall for 2 weeks trying to find. The cows were just crashing. They you know, and we wouldn't feed them in the bunk because you got to force them to eat the pasture. And they wasn't eating pasture out there, so I said, finally one night we had a thunderstorm coming, and it ran out a little feed because now their feed has become really high energy and very grain dense because you're still trying to get that grain in them, but you're not getting a lot of forage because they're supposed to get that out in the pasture. Well, we're still overcrowded some, and these cows are just killing each other to get the bunk because they're starving. They're walking around like a bunch of skinny old water buffalo. I mean, there's just ribs showing, bags are flopping. It's like things are coming off the rails here all of a sudden. And we never did find out what happened. It took about 2 to 3 weeks, and then they started eating better, and we got them caught up at the bunk. It's like, I don't care. I got to feed these cows, man. They're things are not right. You know, I'm not going to starve. Here's what the thing was. The one night I fed them, I think it was on 4th of July night, and I ran that feed out, and I seen these cows killing each other to get at this feed. I mean, I seen one cow bulldoze under the other one, flip her right over onto her back in the alley. And I mean, these cows are just hurting each other to get at food. They were that starved, and they just come off of pasture, and there's all kinds of grass out there. And we checked all kinds of things. I irrigate out of the creek, and I thought, well, maybe somebody put something in the water or something happened to the water, but then they wouldn't graze the corners where the water didn't get, so that eliminated that. And we was scratching this and scratching that, and I still think as a possible theory, one thing I noticed in the tall grass by the irrigation pump back there by the creek flats is this like giant mayfly insect that I'd never really seen or noticed before, but it was just swarms of them in the grass. And then I noticed it at our place up the road here, just in the tall grass around the barn. It's like, man, it's just thick with these things. And the thing out in the pasture is, once they ate a piece down, they'd eat it to the dirt. But then there'd be this tall stuff next to them they wouldn't touch. I was starting to theorize that possibly this insect, or maybe their secretion or something was going on to where, like I said, once they ate it, they got the tops down, they grind it right to the dirt because they wouldn't eat it was crazy. You see lush spots as big as this table or even the kitchen here, and just hardly untouched. A couple bites out of it, and then all of a sudden there'd be a spot this big bowed right to the ground. And so it was just, and then we talked to people, and Brian was checking with people, and we was beating our head on the wall here. What's going on with these cows? Never did find out. After about 3 weeks, they finally took them a month really to kind of come back around, but that really kicked them in the can.
I bet.
And so our production was down to high 50s. And like I said, we're not giving them any more grain because we don't have it. So that was a tough deal out the first year, and then kind of going back to your production. So I was on that side of the pendulum with kind of a minimal grain, and I learned that these Holsteins won't give 70 pounds on 5-6 pounds of grain. Apparently it takes that much just for maintenance, just for the walking and back and forth. And then we kind of found the happy medium of mid-60s. Between 60 and 70, depending on the grazing in the year and time of year and all that stuff, and a more moderate amount of grain, not super high. Well, then a year ago or two, we actually pushed the other way. What I was seeing was there was the spot between about 65 and 75 pounds of milk for our Holsteins that we were just kind of buying milk. In other words, I could feed them more grain, but at 75 pounds of milk, I really didn't get any more money than I did at 65. So why make everybody else money if you're not going to make any more? Well, then what we found was, and I had some pretty good nutritionists along the way, but there was some cream or gravy up there by 80 pounds. And so we pushed a little more grain and a little less forage, and we had some really good forage that year. And we were able to get 80, 81 pounds out of these cows. This was on confinement during the winter. But that extra grain, the extra investment in their feed made a little more money. So we learned that. So I've been down to mid-50s with these Holsteins, which again, mid-50s if you got the right kind of cows and you're not putting the money into them. I know a lot of these Amish guys, if they can get 50 pounds, they're really happy, or with considerably less. But for our setup and our cows and everything else, I kind of tried all over the baseball field. And
so it actually made sense to push them a little bit more up to 80 from a cost perspective and an income perspective than upping it a little bit and getting into the mid-70s. Right.
Because there was just a dead spot in there for almost 10 pounds. I just kept pushing pencil. It's like, this ain't really, and then they started kind of cranking, because that was the other thing too I learned through the whole realm of things is, when you sell cows, and I'm basing a lot of this on numbers and records and DHA testing, and we sell a lot of good cows. We've got a lot of good cows. I don't have from all of this culling and dairy sales I've had over the years, and with all the genetics, I don't have a lot of dogs. Everybody's got ABC cows, but our lower end, our C cows are really good cows. By and large, everybody still gets a dog once in a while, but what we found was a lot of the middle ones were more saleable, either because they're more of a fresh cow or just a little better numbers or for whatever. So we get a little bit of the split in the cow makeup. But the cows that went through that first summer, all of a sudden their records are all screwed up. So now I'm trying to base these cow sales on these goofed up numbers in two different worlds. We was getting, because when I was 3 times a day for a while, we was getting 105 pounds of cow. Well, according to DHA, we was getting 99 is what we was getting at the time.
But the DHI numbers mattered, though.
Right. When you're selling cows, you want decent records, but again, false numbers doesn't do anybody any good. They still got to be real. But it did strike me where there was this middle ground where it was just buying milk. And then, like I said, because these cows have all been bred and kind of raised to crank, it's wired in them, man. That's what got me so long in conventional world. They got that. I had heifers getting DAs. I was beating my head on the wall down here trying all this stuff, feeding antibiotic salts, and put a special fresh group together. And for years, that's all I did. That's where I really got frustrated. It was like, something ain't right here. All these little band-aids are throwing at these cows, and my brother made a comment one time, it wasn't for humans, a Holstein breed would be extinct because we got to hold their hands the whole time or hooves to get into production here. Well, that's the other thing we found out through transition, and actually I could tell it within a year. Healthier cows.
Really?
And we was feeding some flax meal and doing a lot of things. And like I said, we'd been on a high forage diet for quite a bit before that. And after our little, blooper in the middle of grazing season down there, that was one thing that kind of took us a 2-year hurt, was when you got Holsteins and big cows that want to make that peak and you starve them of that, they don't come back. It doesn't come back that year. So that's what I say about these numbers and trying to find cows to call and making good decisions. All of a sudden, you got to start reading all of that into your numbers, because cows, and it affects others. Some cows weigh more than others, and you can see it on the DHA. She peaked at 120 pounds last year, and this year she peaked at 82, and she's down to 58 by her third test. Last year she ran that curve up for months and months and months. So you notice all these little nuances, but like I said, by and large, the ones that really don't fit kind of weed themselves out by default after a while, and most of the rest of them kind of learn to get in the groove. And so this like the third year, when we was kind of adding the extra grain, we actually was getting 80 pounds of milk on pasture last summer. I don't know why. We had really good feed. We was feeding more grain than we did this year, but it ain't like, we wasn't doing a 50% concentrate ration. They were just... And it's always been that way, it seems like. You get years where it's just everything's right, whether it's the feed from the summer before, the weather, the magical great, everything's just lined up right to where things work, And I don't think we fed them a lot different this year. The last 2 years have been really good on pasture as far as our rotation. We've gotten a lot better. We're not grazing 15, 18 in its tall fescue. We're trying to graze it when it's a lot shorter and just better quality. Matter of fact, I just think about it, Brian. Last year, I remember our pasture samples were coming back really low. Just like early in the spring, it's like 18%, 17, 16%. And you'd think it'd be 25 or low 20s. We're taking 10-inch clippings, and the tests coming back are like, really? But the cows milked 80 pounds last summer. This year we had better tests, on that. But like I said, I figured that out a long time ago. Working the cows. Cows don't read. Whatever feed sample you want to throw in front of them, they really don't care. No.
Well, and it might have been something along the lines of, protein is plenty available in the organic system, and I wonder if that lower protein level was being offset somewhere else with something else in that feed that was causing them to, some other.
Could have been higher sugars or something.
If
you have a lot of sunshine with your sugars
Well, last
higher.
year, actually, we had a lot of cloudy weather, which I think was the problem of the plant, why the tests were coming back, because we had just a lot of rain, cloudy, damp, just continual, it was awesome grass growing weather, but not a lot of sun. And then the other thing that didn't make any sense, we had it for a year and a half, horribly low butterfats that we couldn't seem to do anything about. I kept beating on the nutritionists all the time. We got too much corn here, we got this, we got that. 285s. I've never had a 285 in my life. I never had below 3 in my life. And we had a 278 butterfats. Like, holy cow. Something's wrong, but the cows wasn't getting laminitis, they chewing their cuds, the numbers on the milk test didn't jive with what you see in the cows, because, we went, talked to everybody in the vet, and so anyway, I've had all kinds of weird stuff happen, so it's farming.
Were there any cow families that you were surprised that did not transition to the grazing well at all? you really worked on genetics over the years.
Right.
And were there some that did a lot better than you anticipated and others that it just didn't really work?
I didn't track it well enough to give you a qualified answer for that. I used to really be into my cow families, but like I said, I don't milk my own cows now, by and large, and
that does change the game.
It does. Well, when we went organic too, what I really didn't appreciate was the extra acres, and I used to buy lots of really good feed from my neighbors. They'd have extra hay. I got some really good farms here, and they'd have extra second cutting. Boom, mile and a half away, nice half-mile fields all day long. All of a sudden, you can't do that no more. So I'm picking up lots of, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds on the agronomy, but we farmed a lot of. I always said I can talk to everybody at church, or at least I could back then, because I was sitting in on about 4 or 5 land deals. I could get along with my neighbors, but I was traveling 10 miles to go, transition some overgrown Christmas tree patch into some farmland. But so we did a lot of that. But I don't even remember where I was going here for my point. But back to cow families. Here's what I did notice. I didn't track cow families enough to give a qualified answer to you, but what I did notice was that cows of all sorts surprised me. We had some stocky, beefy ones that were more in shorter and just a wider front end that I would consider probably a better grazing animal, and not these open-ribbed, great big, tall, Holsteins. And we've had some of both. I've got some cows that amaze me. They do that well on grazing, because they used to just be the first and last standing at the bunk. I'm thinking, there's no way you're going to get enough feed up. Excuse me, enough feed out in that pasture, But a lot of the good cows, even if they're pretty dairy, seem to do pretty well yet. I guess you're not getting that on the mic. There, so we're good. So at any rate, lots of cows surprised me how they do. We've had some of them cows that I thought were a little on the fat side and just a little meaty anyways. I thought they'd lean out. They still seem to pork up. And we've done pretty well carrying weight, because that's a big deal too, especially these Holsteins, is trying to keep the weight on. We had that first year when they crashed. They took a lot of weight off. I was really worried about, it ain't just weight, it's getting them cows bred back when they're two body score, 2 1/4. And we got through that all right. And like I said, I've had a lot of weird and different things go on the last few years, but I can't always put my finger on what goes on with them. But we have definitely been all over the board on low grain and
I work with, I have 2 routes in Ohio of grass milk. 100% grass milk.
Okay.
And I had to do the body condition scores on all those herds. And I was really surprised. I was expecting some of the big Holstein herds, the tall, big 2-story Holstein, I call them.
Okay.
I thought they wouldn't hold condition. And what I saw was the breed of the cow had 0 to do with how well they kept condition.
Really?
It was all on the management of the farm.
Really?
And because I saw skinny jerseys, I saw fat jerseys, I saw skinny Holstein. It was really surprising to me. Now, some of them did say that there are certain families, breed didn't matter, but that just don't do well on the all grass.
That.
But I was really surprised how it seemed like the breed of the cow didn't matter.
Really? Well, that's, I was always told early on, boy, Holsteins is a tough way to go organic, and of course I had all this breeding into, I had stud companies used to call me up and even though they were grades, was interested in some dams, and stuff. So we had good genetics, and but yeah, I was pleased that for the most part the Holstein herd held up pretty well.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed in getting around to the number of farms we get on, and Mike, you've probably seen it too, is that well, you already said it. It's the management of the farm. It's not the breed of the animal. I feel like in some cases there's some farms that aren't getting the production that they're looking for, or are trying to go for more butterfat, so they always go for that next breed that is, I don't know what it is right now, but probably Fleck V is the big thing right now.
That's the hot one. Right?
Okay,
breed.
Gotcha.
And they try and breed cows to get what they're looking for, when really what they need to do is change their management to manage the cows to get what they're looking for.
Gotcha.
So, Holsteins, your 2-story, some of you said you got your 2-story Holsteins out there that are working just fine, and there's some smaller frame cows that weren't. That doesn't surprise me.
Gotcha.
On the surface, it doesn't make sense, but once you start looking at it, it makes more sense. It's management.
I don't think you're going to breed a cow, no matter what genetics you use, to make milk on dry cow hay and Moliflora roses. It's just not going to work.
Right. They haven't found that genetic gene yet.
It's called Hereford, I think.
Yeah, they're right. That's right. Exactly. If you're making meat, you might be okay. If you're trying to put it in a pail, it might be a little lean.
So I think we'll wrap up here pretty soon, but just changing gears completely for the last couple of questions. You're a larger size farm for this region and the group that we work with, and primarily the people we've talked to on this podcast are, smaller Amish dairies, 30 to 50 cows. So I'd be remiss if we didn't ask about, what it is, grazing wise. We've talked a little bit about that, but, milking 250 to 275 cows. How far are cows walking? What's your management style like? I know those are two varying questions, but I think there's a lot of people that are just kind of curious what it's like on this size farm.
Gotcha. Well, I'll quantify that on the front end just by saying I think most of my Amish counterparts are considerably wiser than I am. And I've had a couple of them ask me, why don't you scale down? In other words, I'm complaining about I got all these employees and I'm so busy chasing, and I'm chasing dirt, 12 miles away and just busy. And, why don't you do a little less? My trouble is I work for Greenstone, and, once I took that plunge, part of it is, I don't know, a little Dutch pride, maybe a little bit of it. But, when I built that barn, that wasn't where I wanted to go really. that was how I had to stay in business. And once you put all that money into new facilities, now you got to make more milk to make them payments, So you once you take that road, you got to head down it. But as far as being larger and cows walking, we've been blessed here. We've had irrigation out of this creek since for 40 years. And so, I found out back in school when we first started how that completely changed this farm, completely. We had so much blow sand here that it didn't take me long when I was young to figure out that was the most limiting factor is water. I mean, you can put all the fertilizer, all the right seed, all the right tillage, whatever you want to do, and come July, that nice looking cornfield turns into a bunch of, nothing. So, and I am amazed at how our tall fescue does here. I am glad, I think, that we got that in the mix. It is the predominant grass out here. You can't hardly kill it. It yields by far the most that I can tell. And again, I'm not particularly an expert on it, but from what I'm seeing here, even on our sandy soils and everything, it by far takes the abuse. And I mean, we're putting a lot of cows on these paddocks and a lot of rotations in a year. I'd have to go back and look at the records, but it would shock me if these cows ain't getting over these paddocks 10 times a year. We got like a 20-day rotation, depending on time of year and stuff. But if you can, and we've been blessed with some really good years. I mean, we've had a lot of rainy springs. We haven't had this knockdown going into the fall dry and starting out next, April with 80 degrees blowing. We haven't had one of them. So I don't know what that side of the coin is, but we can run an amazing amount of animals on this 115 acres because we'll have both groups of cows. So we got 260, 70, 80 cows out there. We've got maybe 30 dry cows. Sometimes we run small groups. Well, our bred heifers are going out every day. They're on a smaller chunk of the farm, but they do some chasing sometimes. But that pasture has been amazing to me, what it will produce. I should track the tonnage on it because it's double what I thought it might do. So
and is that in large part thanks to the irrigation?
It is. Part of that is I really pushed the fertility before we started. and I put everything but the kitchen sink out there because I'm kind of a salad guy anyway. So I had cow manure, chicken litter, compost. I put a little bit of everything out, especially on that blow sand, and tried to build it up before we started. But that amount of manure from them cows on there every day feeds all that, and I still fertilize, some, and put gypsum out there. So I try to take care of the dirt, and it's been taking care of us pretty well so far. And because we are limited on acres, I don't put a lot of summer. We haven't really done any summer annuals at all yet. And sometimes I got a grazing consulting out here. I've had Mike Lamore out here about every year, and sometimes early in the spring he said, "Well, you should fill these thin spots in. There's too much bare ground here." But when he's here in the fall, it's like it fills right back in with mostly clover, mostly white clover fills in. It actually ends up being a pretty good balanced mix for the cows. Of course, cows always take that clover down, but yet it keeps coming back. And the tall fescue, we got to clip it sometimes. You get a pretty good shag on there in a bunch, and then they don't eat that. We've had rust issues. We had that running in this fall. All of a sudden, boom, you'll have a brown grass out there they really don't want to eat. So there's still always things to fight with. But as far as yield and being able to handle cows, we still have a mix out there, some orchard grass, but the ryegrass is managed different than the tall fescue. Like right now, we've got spots out there that grew more than we was able to keep up with at the end, and the cows didn't like it much. We had rust coming in, but I got shag out there that's 10 inches tall that I wished was 5 or 6. We just let some dry cows and heifers out yesterday just to try to get a little mowed down again. We've had snow on the ground, and it's been down to 9 degrees up here a couple times. Yeah, a couple weeks ago we had winter, but at any rate, I guess that's the one thing I would say about. I'm quite surprised at because. Yeah, and we got all of our bred heifers are on a full-time pasture 15 miles from home. I say full-time, I mean full all summer. And they're getting full pasture out there, bred heifers and stuff. But
being here this past summer, I've been coming here since you transitioned to organic, but it finally hit me this past summer how much irrigation changes the game. I was talking with you, what's your rotation, or how long you're leaving paddocks to grow back, and when you said 18 to 22 days, somewhere in that ballpark. At first, I'm so trained into no irrigation, and you hear 18 to 22 days, and I think, well, that's not long.
That's nuts. Yeah, and I think that's why the tall fescue becomes the king out there, because that stuff grows 1.5 inches a day with the right conditions.
That stuff will take a beating.
And it does. You can't kill it. I mean, it's the last
almost
man
like
standing
Kentucky
out there.
31. You almost can't kill it.
Right. And so you can abuse the pastures a little bit, and I hate to, because there's still other good stuff out there that's going to take the beating. And early on we had ryegrass out there, but they don't just hold up. And in the sand, they actually pull ryegrass right out by the roots, because they'll vacuum that right off the ground. And then I was like, well, man, the stuff is laying on the ground. Of course, tall fescue, that's got a big old stubble up there 4 or 5 inches tall. That there's dead little bits of the ryegrass laying in between.
That's
the
what
spots.
I think is so interesting from in central Ohio, where I am, to up here. The different grasses, the different soils, how even the grazing management, everything changes significantly, and how everybody has to figure out how to work with their climate and your soil.
Yeah.
And because if I brought guys up and I told them, hey, you're on an 18 to 20 day routine, they're like, what in the world is he doing?
Right.
Well, irrigation for one, and your tall fescue.
Right.
So it's a different game.
And it pushes us to graze quicker, because if you let that tall fescue go, they're not going to eat it. Or eat it near as good, or they'll eat the tops, and then you still got to clip it more. But yeah, the best. It's a tough thing for us, because we're used to having a lot of grass out there, because we take still a fair amount of first cutting off, and we might take a paddock or two of the second cutting, but just to kind of keep it up, because that first year especially, and maybe the second year, we was trying to graze this stuff, and then all of a sudden it's starting to head out, and you're still trying to make them eat it. Meanwhile, the stuff that they should be on is getting 2 inches taller, and so that's always a hard walk. But when the paddocks catch up, and you're starting because you're always looking out ahead. And it's like, oh man, we're going to get a little tight down here, or you don't get the irrigation going quite on time, or you just flat out let's face it, even with irrigation, when it's 95, 90 degrees out, grass don't grow. I mean, it grows till about 10 o'clock in the morning, but we don't keep our water going all the time. And but you know, when you're grazing 6 to 8 inch stuff, all of a sudden them cows travel over a lot of stuff. And then when all of a sudden that changes and now they're in 10 inch stuff and 12 inch stuff, it slows down so much. It's like, well, you know, we got to make the paddocks smaller. Well, we're going to put them out for 2 feedings to help clean them up. And we're putting groups of cattle in and off to, well, we're going to run dry cows behind them. And so, yeah, it's a crapshoot. It's a hard deal. I mean, to do it properly.
I think what you just said goes back to what we said about managing how you're grazing, and you're seeing what the cows are eating. You're seeing how long it's taking them to get through a paddock. You're looking at the height of it. It boils down to management to utilize what you have and to make sure that it doesn't get away from you. Run them through faster if you need to, so it doesn't get away, or take a cutting of hay off.
Right. We clip a fair amount of. I mean, I didn't clip as much this year because we had more groups moving around to kind of clean up after them. But you know, with tall fescue, if you let that stuff go, you're losing that production because they're not going to eat it the second time around. They're not going to touch it because they don't have to. They got good stuff alongside of it, and then they'll sit there at the gate because they know they got goodies in the barn. So it's like, I ain't touching that stuff. But they are better now than they used to be, just because as heifers they eat what's out there. You know, so that has made the herd better as we go too. That is huge. That's been huge, I think.
Well, it sounds like you've learned a lot, and it sounds like there's more to learn too.
Yeah,
as always.
Yeah.
And there's a lot we didn't touch on, but I think we're going to wrap up here.
Sure.
But I'd love to come back and chat more about what you've learned next year. And agronomy, we didn't even touch on agronomy, but
I don't know too much about that either, because you've been out to my cornfield. Sometimes I look like I know what I'm doing, and then you turn the corner and it's like, was this guy's first year or what?
That's when you say that's the neighbor.
That's the neighbor. The trouble is, I'm the only organic guy in the hood, so I can't blame it on anybody right now.
But it's definitely been a learning experience.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yeah, and that's, you know, my personality is I kind of like the challenges and learning stuff and seeing stuff, and I've always, you know, back when I used Valpar, that's what really struck me was, you know, I wanted the best hay I could give these cows to get the most out of every bite and get the production, and so I'll get rid of them dandelions. Well, what I noticed was in August, you're standing in this third year hayfield, maybe fourth year hayfield, and try to clean these down, and there's all this little green stuff down in between the alfalfa plants coming. That's when it really hit me. God made this dirt to grow something. And there's bazillions of weed seeds that I'm never going to out-chase or outrun or anything else. And so it took me 15 years of just like I was, seems like the conventional world wants to fight it. Wants to fight how God made things to work. And it's the same thing with, you know, the cows and the feed and everything else. It's so I've kind of had that back in me way back when and trying different things. It's like, when you have 2-year-old heifers calving and 4 days fresh they have a DA, and it's your 20th one, you know, so far in the last 4 or 5 months, something's wrong. So we're not doing, you know, and we're trying this and we give them that, and you know, so this like I said, this just feels better and it flows better. It's harder. It's harder.
You're kind of trying to work with nature instead of fighting nature.
Right. And so I don't think most conventional guys consider it a fight. I think I don't know. You know, it's like I read, I get all these conventional magazines yet, and it's I see it with my neighbors all the time because they got to spray every acre every year anymore. And it used to be in dairy land, at least you left your hay fields alone, or maybe you put Valpar in your best ones or something to kill the dandelions. But you know, I figured out this grass helps me. You know, I've seen plenty of studies that say the cows like the grass. Well, that makes sense. That's what they're made for. And with the newer varieties, they got higher energy, higher sugar. It's all good stuff, but guys have a hard time making it because grass. Yeah, to me, when I was young, I learned that through the no-till thing and everything else. Like, oh, it's stupid quackgrass and June grass. You take first cutting off and you'll never get another cut off them. So I got to kill that grass. Well, now we got all these other weird weeds coming through. Well, that's what I seen when we no-till. You get the co-op spray rigs out there, he's burned down half the fence row. Next thing you know, by August, you got these giant, weird-looking weeds there. It's like, I've learned that quack grass can be my friend in the right spot. I would rather have grass growing around telephone poles than weird weeds of all sorts that are 6 foot tall, making a bunch more weed seed, So them are little nuances you see, but the conventional guys have gotten so bought into this, I gotta spray, and then I read all this stuff, and of course, we are gonna be the norm 5 to 10 years from now. I mean, cultivation's gonna be coming back. There's more crop rotation coming in, cover crops coming, and it's kind of getting there by necessity because what they're doing is finally coming to fruition. It's not working, And now, we'll throw 2,4-D in. That'll fix it for a while. And then you read what the EPA done. Well, now you can't spray if it's over 10 mile an hour. It used to be 15 mile an hour, and you can spray between this time and there. We fixed the problem. They didn't do anything. I mean, they're going to have 3/4 of soybeans now are going to be good for 2,4-D, but they're still going to have all this off-target crap because they haven't fixed the problem. It's still 2,4-D, But at any rate, but they're trying hard. But yeah, when that what bugs me about some of that stuff is the conventional world still uses the original arguments for why this is better. Well, we use less pesticides and less herbicides now. Well, maybe you did when Roundup first came up, but guess what? You're using 3 times as much now because you got to be out there 3 times, because nothing kills anything anymore. So
and
it's
you've got to stack all the stuff on top of each other because you've got super weeds now.
Yep. And it's not like we don't have weeds, and I grow. Sometimes you just got to talk to the right people. I got an organic guy who grows corn that's really proud of his pigweeds and ragweeds. And well, talking to Kevin this year was good too. Because I got all these bamboos out here of 6 foot tall lamb's quarters snuck in between the rows that we didn't get, and you got corn up there 11 foot, and your lamb's quarters up to your ears. It's not pretty either, but it's got good minerals in it.
That's right. That's a rich man's rich farmer's.
Right. Yep. So, I guess I don't know.
Well, let's wrap it up.
Yeah,
in that
we can
mode.
do that. We can do that.
Well, just thanks a lot for taking
Sure.
the time today, and hopefully we'll come back and chat a little bit more.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed the conversation.
Okay.